Today we are going to talk about the endocrine system. And very similar to the nervous system, the endocrine system really has a lot of influence on the other systems. And in fact, a lot of the messages that we have are started and created by the endocrine system with help of the nervous system. So the endocrine system, if we break down what it actually stands for, endo means inside, and then the word part, crene, deals with crisis. So what this word literally translates into is inside crisis. Now, when we think of crisis, usually we think of something that's bad, but basically a crisis, think of it as an event. And so these are inside events that are taking place inside of our body where we are sending messages, either fast or slow, with the endocrine system. So our nervous system, we talked a lot about like reflexes and reactions, things that we can see happen really, really fast. With the endocrine system, yeah, some do happen fast, but others are a little bit more slower developing. And so with the endocrine system, we don't have a lot of organs. Instead, we have what we call glands. And here you're seeing a picture of the glands within the human body. And so if we kind of look at some of the anatomy, this would be something that you would want to know as far as parts of the endocrine system. We have different parts of the brain. So you have the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus. That's all in the upper part of the brain. That's where a lot of the messages are actually going to be started, is in the brain. Then you have the thyroid as well as the parathyroid. The thyroid is kind of in the middle, the parathyroid kind of on the outsides. Then you have the thymus, and then when you get into kind of the middle part of our body, the pancreas. We'll talk a lot about the idea of diabetes and blood sugar levels. The adrenaline glands, so if you've had adrenaline before. And then obviously if you're a male or female, you have different hormones that are going to play a role and be affected by some of these. So in the male, we have the testes, and then in the female, we have the ovaries, and then also the placenta near the uterus of the female when pregnancy takes place. So the overall locations of these are, we have some in the brain and then kind of others in the mid area of our body. But we also have some accessory things like our eyes that can perceive things, our ears that can perceive things. And so if we hear a big loud noise, that might startle us. And so indirectly, that might increase the production of hormones. If we see something that is desirable, it might increase or decrease some hormones that are in our body. And so what you're seeing in this slide is you're seeing the overall main parts of our endocrine system, but there's also other things that play a role with us perceiving and understanding those hormones and how they're released. If we look specifically at the part of the brain, that's the big part of the endocrine system, the pineal gland and pituitary gland, there's small kind of little hangy ball things that are in our brains that are going to release and start some of the messaging of these hormones. So they play a real vital role with the endocrine system. Here's kind of our last slide describing those major glands. And so these, I would want you to know where they are. I would want you to know what they're all involved with. And then also understanding that within the male and the female, we have different hormones that are produced. So let's first of all start off with, what is a hormone? So a hormone can be something that is a protein. It can be something that is a lipid, a steroid, which is a type of lipid. And so a hormone is a chemical message that is released by a gland. And so when we looked back at like the pituitary gland, it is going to release hormones. The thymus is going to release hormones. So these glands are able to create fats, lipids, steroids, or some proteins that are hormones, and then they're released throughout the blood. So the blood circulatory system is really important in helping spread a lot of these different hormones throughout the body. That's the path that they take. They don't go through the nervous system. Instead, they're released and taken in because of the blood. So hormones, what do they help us with? They help us with our growth and development. So if you think of, people in your grade, you didn't all go through puberty at the same time. Some people got taller faster. Some people maybe developed hair earlier or later. Metabolism, so how well you process your foods. So that is a little bit of a genetic component. So if you look at some people that maybe have a history of obesity in their family, there is some genetic component to that. However, it's not completely hereditary. If you have some people that are very, very skinny, that means that they might have a different metabolism, which again can be genetic, but there's also other factors that go with that, certainly, like exercise and the diet that they have. Sexual function, so the capability of getting pregnant or producing gametes or the ability to conceive are all part or regulated by hormones, as well as the overall reproduction. And then our moods. We'll talk about this coming up, but the feelingness of tired, the feelingness of excitement, the feelingness of anxiety can be influenced by your hormones and the amount of level that they have. So let's talk specifically now about some different glands. So the pituitary found in our brain is what really regulates all of the others. It's very, very small, but so, so important. And it does have two parts, the anterior and the posterior, and so they kind of release or affect different hormones. Here's kind of a diagram of it, a little bit blown up, or a kind of a specialized picture of it. And so this is in our brain, and it's able to take those messages, it's able to release proteins, it's able to release hormones that might be fats into the bloodstream, and then that's how our body then is going to interpret those messages. And one thing is that hormones only affect certain cells. So like we talk about with males, testosterone, they're only going to affect male areas. Right? We talk about the penis, the testes, those areas. If we take a more broadly known hormone, like let's say growth hormone, GH, that affects all kinds of cells because all parts of our body are going to be growing muscles, bone, neurons, those types of things. So our cells will know, okay, can I use this hormone to my advantage, or is it a hormone that I disregard? And it does that because there are certain receptors on the outside of the cell itself that will either accept and then start a change within that cell, or it doesn't have a receptor and therefore it won't be affected by that hormone. All right, so the pituitary gland is just very, very important with all of the things that it does. The overall function of it is that it releases, a lot of our hormones, the anterior pituitary as well as the posterior pituitary. If I just kind of go back and forth, so the anterior means front or towards the front, they are going to affect certain glands. So again, a lot of these originate. And then the posterior, they are going to actually release hormones. So anterior talks to other glands. Posterior is actually going to release hormones, and that's in both males and females with the pituitary. Next, let's talk about the thyroid. So this is kind of found in your throat area, kind of at the end of your neck. There is the thyroid, then parathyroid. So the thyroid is kind of on the inside, or like the middle is what we will call it. And that has a very, very big influence on our metabolism. But also, if you've ever heard of someone that's had a goiter before, it's kind of this huge mass that's on their neck. It could be because they actually don't have very good salt concentration levels, and so you can have a goiter that forms. If you don't know what a goiter is, look it up. They're kind of unique things to have. So the thyroid metabolism, specifically, it also deals with some salt concentrations in our body. The parathyroid, so paras alongside, this is a gland that's going to specifically talk about the calcium levels in our body. So this is really, really important with our muscles as well as with the production and the maintenance of our bone. And so the parathyroid, a lot of calcium levels, so bone, muscle, very, very important for just basically our regular everyday conditions. Our next one is the pancreas. When we talk about, like, some messages are relatively short, some are relatively long. So the pancreas has a hormone that we are dealing with every time that we eat. So if you know of someone that has diabetes, that is an illness with the ability or inability to monitor their blood sugar levels. So if we just get done eating a meal, our blood sugar level becomes really, really high. And so what happens is we will take that sugar out of our bloodstream so that we don't get a quote sugar high. Um, and then times when we're hungry and we don't have a lot of sugars in our body, then we will release those sugars. So the hormone that's involved with this is mainly insulin, but then glucagon also helps to raise the blood sugar in the bloodstream. And then the insulin is going to increase the use of sugar. So it's kind of a unique thing. Sugar is stored in the liver, and then the insulin is going to release sugar. That's kind of the relationship. So the liver and the pancreas usually are the troublesome spots with people that have diabetes. Now let's talk about the kidneys, and on top of the kidneys are adrenal glands. So if you've heard of adrenaline before, or if you've gotten excited, or if you've shaken because maybe let's just say competed in a football game or a basketball game or a volleyball match, your body's in full gears trying to perform at its optimum, and the adrenal glands release a variety of hormones that help us with performance and help us with our blood flow as well as with how much our kidneys are going to take in salt and water, but also they can help control the circumference and the diameter of our blood vessels, veins, and arteries so that we can pump blood better or not as much, depending on what type of situation we're dealing with. So they are the little kind of creamish colored things that are on top of the kidneys. And what they are going to do is they're going to produce steroids, and they're also going to help out again with the salt concentrations. They are going to help produce estrogen and testosterone. So you may think, well, doesn't that happen in the testes and ovaries? Those are actually areas that are going to be influenced by it, but not necessarily where they're going to be created. And so one of the things that we see not just with humans, but with everything is something called the flight or fight response. And so if you've been in the woods and you've scared a critter and it's run away, that would be an example of a flight. Get out of there, I'm scared. So a white-tailed deer running away, a grouse that scares the crap out of you when you're walking through the woods. And a lot of creatures are their flight. Some, however, let's say for example a grizzly bear, when it's near its cubs, they might be fight. So when they see something dangerous, they're coming after you because they think that their best response is to fight off something that is going to impact their cub or going to impact them. And so that's something that is influenced by our adrenal medulla. It's the top part of the middle part specifically of the adrenal glands. The flight or fight response. So if you've heard of an EpiPen, that's something that you take if you have if you have allergies. Norepinephrine kind of slows you down over time. So those are controlled on top of the kidneys in an area called the adrenal glands. So now specifically we talk about male and female. We all know the parts that they have, but just understanding that they are going to be influenced because they are different parts by different hormones. So yes, technically, if you took a supplement of hormones, and we see this with people that maybe go through a sex change, they might take an injection of a synthetic type of hormone, and so that would influence what's all taking place within their body. Um, Different males, if you've seen commercials for like low testosterone or low T, sometimes that's just something naturally that happens over time, is that as males age, they um, create or they have less testosterone. And so their sex drive, their ability, aggression, their ability of performance might go down as time goes on because they're just not producing as much testosterone. Females, their cycle is influenced by the monthly cycle. There's hormones that control that. But then also over time, we know that a female will go through menopause where she's no longer going to release eggs and no longer be able to produce offspring. And so, in closing, our endocrine system summary is that we're not dealing with organs, instead, we're dealing with glands, and they send chemical signals, usually called hormones, and they are going to be produced in the glands but then released in the blood. And some will happen really, really quick, some will happen relatively slow. And all of this is controlled by different feedback mechanisms within the body.